Okay, so now you're going to do this on your own with the article Hounding the Innocent that you have in front of you. So, the first reading of an essay is intended to help you understand the text and to confirm your prediction. So, you've already done the handout before activity 2 and 3, where you surveyed the text and made predictions based on kind of the subtitles and the information that was there without reading it. So this first step, as I mentioned before, is called reading with the grain or sort of playing the believing game. So as you read, you're going to think about a few things. Which of your predictions turned out to be true? Is there anything in here that has surprised you? And you're going to read and annotate with the grain as a first step. So on the right side, you're going to make notes in the margins identifying the purpose of the text. So we're looking for the main ideas and kind of following the argument. You're going to circle any words that you don't know so that you could look them up and clarify them. And you're basically on the right-hand side going to say what the author's saying, but in your own words. So as you go along, you're kind of just summarizing each little section and making some clarifying notes. So go ahead and start. Let me walk you through the beginning. I'm going to start here with the title and make sure you have your pen out so you can do the same thing. In this case, you probably don't want to use a highlighter. You probably just want to take your pen. That way you can just write as we go along. So I'm going to start here at the title. So it says Hounding the Innocent. And I'm just going to make a note here that innocent people are being picked on if I'm hounding them. Obviously, that's what's happening. Then I have here by Bob Herbert. From the New York Times on June 13th, 1999, and I'm just going to note that this is a national newspaper, so probably a pretty credible source. And now I'm going to start my reading, and now I'm going to make all my notes on the right-hand side, and I'm just going to, at the top of that in the corner, write with the grain, and I'm going to make notes as I go down. So the first part says an anti-loitering law that allowed the Chicago police to arrest more than 42,000 people from 1992 to 1995 was declared unconstitutional last week by the Supreme Court. Now, if there's anything in there that you don't know, make sure you circle it and clarify it. And now I'm just going to make a little note on the side. It says a law against loitering, which is basically standing around. So there's a law, keeping people from just standing around that was okay. And now it's being considered to be violating our rights because that's what unconstitutional means. So I just wrote on the side that there's now a law against loitering or standing around that has now been considered by the public to be considered violating our rights, and the Supreme Court is agreeing with that. And that's basically what's going on. So make a little note there. Now, I'm going to keep reading. It says the Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia howled in dissent, which should tell you something. The law was an abomination, just like the practice in New York of stopping and frisking Black and Hispanic people by the tens of thousands for no good reason, and just like the practice of pulling over and harassing perfectly innocent Black and Hispanic motorists on streets and highways in many parts of the country. Now, that definitely gets some attention. So, I noted some words in here. I noted dissent, and I'm going to underline that because I forget what that means. And then I just remembered, wait, that was a vocab word I had recently, meaning to disagree. So, in disagreement is how she had the look on her face. I'm also noticing some words here that they're stopping them and frisking and harassing. I noted the word innocent, and I also noted here Black and Hispanic because it seems to be that is who this law seems to be targeting according to our author. So what I wrote here on the side is that this law seems to be allowing people to be harassed for no reason. And this is happening more for Blacks and Hispanics than other people. Or I've noted that there's higher numbers or that they seem to be being targeted. So I'm just, again, believing everything that's said, and I'm just noting down that this law is a problem because it's allowing, or you could say causing, people to be targeted for no reason. So now, again, I've just added what's being said. I'm summarizing. I'm keeping track of the issues. Now, I'm going to go just a little bit further so that you can see this next part here. We get into now a subtitle that says The Faces of Ethnic Profiling. And I've noted the word profiling, and I put a little note there that this is when we sort of target a certain group of people, and we assign, kind of a stereotype or a judgment. We're profiling someone. And it says ethnic profiling by law enforcement authorities in the United States comes in many forms, and all of them are disgusting. So on the right-hand side, I'm going to write two things. The first thing I write is I put that there are a lot of examples of ethnic profiling, that it happens from law enforcement, and that all of them are basically bad. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pull out my highlighter, and I am going to highlight that because that right there would be our thesis statement. So in this article, that line right there kind of sums up now. We had a little bit of background on this anti-loitering law, but what this really comes down to is this sentence right here, that ethnic profiling, meaning profiling people based on their ethnicity, is happening by law enforcement. It's happening in many ways, and all of these ways are very disgusting, and that is our main point. And so I just want you to remember that and to notice that there, because you're going to be asked about that later. Okay, so through this article, you're going to continue to get several examples, and what you're going to do on the right-hand side is continue to summarize them. This next one, when you go here with Sergeant Gerald, you're going to talk about, here's an example with Sergeant Gerald, this is what happened, this was the outcome. Okay, keep going through the article, summarizing, clarifying, noting anything that's kind of an argument, and putting it there on the right. So now that you have done that, and I'm hoping that you took some time to do that for a while on your own, and if you didn't, then stop right here and go ahead and take some time to continue reading with the grade. And now if you're ready, go ahead and hit play again, and you're going to talk about going against the grain. So in this part, in the right-hand margin, and let me just rephrase that. That should totally say left-hand margin, and we're just going to go with it. So you're going to write your reactions to what the author is saying. This is when you can ask questions, you can express surprise, you can disagree, you can elaborate on how horrible this is, you can say that reminds me of a time when, and you can note anything that's confusing as well. Now keep in mind, as we do this, our job is to react. And so you want to, as a reader, be objective, and you want to ask critical questions. You want to think about his argument. At the same time, you do want to bring in your own experience as well. So we're going to be doing against the grain now on the left-hand side. And let's go ahead and start. So we're going to go back up to the top, and it says to be ready to then discuss kind of your opinions with your neighbors. Okay, so against the grain. On the left-hand side, I'm going to read the same thing. I'm going to start with the title, and I'm going to say Hounding the Innocent, and I'm going to write a question and say, how are they being hounded, and how do we know they're innocent? I'm going to look at the author's name. It says by Bob Herbert, and I'm going to say, what ethnicity is Bob? Is he black or Hispanic, and so he's writing from experience, or is he just kind of your typical white guy, and this is what he's hearing, and so maybe he is being less emotional about this, but it's good to know and good to consider. We're going to keep going. We're going to start with against the grain on the left, so label that side. And it says again, an anti-loitering law that allowed the Chicago police to arrest more than 42,000 people from 1992 to 1995 was declared unconstitutional last week by the Supreme Court. Now, my question here said, well, where did this law come from? So why did we have this law? What's the background? Why would we have had an anti-loitering law? Was there, a history of problems? Why was there even a law in existence saying you can't stand around? So that would be a question I have just for historical background. Another question I have is, why did they feel this way, and what evidence do we have? So it says that it's unconstitutional, and I'm wondering why they think that. Now, the other question I'm wondering here is that if 42,000 people over this period of time, now note this is about 3 years, and we're talking here, it looks like in Chicago. My question is that there must have been something that is drawing attention to some of these people. Maybe not even all of them, but at least to some of them. So why are they possibly being stopped? Because loitering tends to mean that you're standing around either attracting negative attention, or you're covering up the storefront and people can't get in, or you're causing a problem. And so my question is, of all these 42,000 people, how many of them were maybe doing something wrong and this law was still doing its job? Okay, as I continue to read, I'm going to continue to go along that line of thinking, just wondering things, asking questions. And then I get into the part there about the Supreme Court Justice who says that this is a horrible law and says that the practice in New York of stopping and frisking Black and Hispanic people has been by the tens and thousands for no good reason, and the practice of pulling them over as motorists or as pedestrians is also just as bad. So I said that the author is making us think here that only Blacks and Hispanics are being targeted, and I want to know if this is true. So of all the people who are being pulled over, it might be good to know how many of them were Black or Hispanic, and that would help us understand that. Another comment that I made here was, again, using these words like an abomination and perfectly innocent and tens of thousands makes it really easy to throw out kind of big numbers or feel bad without knowing the details. And I just kind of wanted to note that loaded language. And then as I keep going, it says the faces of ethnic profiling, and I just said who are the faces? Is it Blacks and Hispanics then that this article is really going to focus on, or is it going to talk about, people from all over? Then we get into the examples here. Again, ethnic profiling by law enforcement authorities in the United States comes in many forms, and all of them are disgusting. Well, I definitely don't disagree with that. I don't really have a question, so I'm just going to keep going. And it gets into this example here about the summer of 1998, and it talks about the Oklahoma Police Department pulling over this Sergeant Gerald, and it's definitely a very emotional example. And as I read, I'm going to say, as a sergeant in the Army, would it make sense that he had a gun? Because they tended to think that that was not okay, or is that why they're asking? If he's a sergeant, I said, what might have led to him being pulled over? So we're definitely meant to think here that he was just driving along and was pulled over. But my question was there anything that caught their attention? Did he have a broken tail light? Was he doing anything wrong? Was he weaving on the road? Because that would be an okay reason to pull him over. But again, if this is right and he just got pulled over for no reason, then of course we don't think that's okay. So we're just going to keep reading, questioning some of the things that this author is giving us, wondering the numbers, wondering where the sources are coming from. At the same time, we can say, this reminds me of a time when we filled out the quick write question, asking if any of you had any experiences or anything like that, and you might bring something in there. You might just ask for more information. When you get further down into profiling targets the innocent, there's a number there in paragraph 8, and it says the police department's own count, more than 45,000 people were stopped and frisked. And it says, but the total number of arrests made by the unit in those 2 years was less than 10,000. So I would say 45,000 is a really big number in 2 years. For New York, it sounds like a lot, but then I wonder what would be the number in other places and other cities or states. Also, what area is this in? If you're in New York City, there's definitely going to be a lot of people walking around and coming and going, and that number might really be quite small. But if you're in Sacramento, then that number might be pretty large. So it is important to consider where we're at. I might wonder where it says it's widely believed that the number was far higher, and I'm asking if they're reporting it. Is this a fact? Is this an opinion? And things like that. So it's important to question our source, but at the same time to still listen to the argument so that we can kind of be objective as we listen. So continue doing that. Here's your task here. So finish reading the article for homework, annotate with the grain on the right, annotate against the grain on the left, and finish the whole article, and then be ready to discuss this tomorrow so that you can get with a partner and kind of see where you're at. And to be quite honest with you, I've done this here on my paper, and I have writing all down the side. I have some things underlined kind of throughout, some of that loaded language, some of those main points. So you really should be kind of packing those margins with some comments on both sides and noticing some things as you read. So good luck. I know you'll do just fine, and just get to it. All right. Thanks, guys.